Duanfang found a small stick and held it in his hand all day long. He was doing nothing now but stare at the black sow and her 16 piglets. The small hut is no longer the dormitory of the pig farm. Now it is a huge pigsty. Duanfang lives in a pigsty, which is fine. Because of Camel's hand, Duanfang has been feeling guilty all the time. But Duanfang accurately found a remedy, which is to take good care of their little 16s. Camel's injury had nothing to do with little 16s, but Duanfang recognized that since Camel cherishes little 16s so much, as long as little 16s was raised, he would be worthy of Camel. Of course, doing so has its price. Duanfang must let 17 pigs live with him. It was okay for the first few days, but slowly the smell was no longer strong. It was simply heroic. The little piggies pooped and peed everywhere, and Duanfang became diligently flustered. Little pig shit is no longer little big shit. It is simply a little wallet. Whenever it falls, Duanfang picks it up. Otherwise, he won't even have a place to step down. Of course, having said that, in fact, there is still no place to step in the hut. Thinking about it, the 16 little piglets are 16 little meatballs. They are constantly moving, playing, chasing, and dazzling. You have to be extra careful when you step out. If you're not careful, the small meatballs will become small meat pies. Duanfang was cautious, not entirely for the sake of Camel. He was afraid that hurting the piglet would hurt Camel's heart. The main reason is that Duanfang himself can bear it. After being together for such a long time, day and night, Duanfang is familiar with every little guy and knows their temperament. He can recognize whoever is naughty, who is lazy, who is bold, and who is timid. It is not good to hurt anyone. Why does Duanfang always hold a small stick in his hand? It's useful. The only purpose is to protect little 16s. Duanfang didn't allow other piglets, not even its mother, to touch it. Duanfang was worried that it would be bullied. When it was time to nurse, Camel was right. The little piggies wanted to grab the teats. At this point, the black sow is heartless. It is not as good as a woman. Duanfang is familiar with women's breastfeeding. They always lift up their blouses, then lean in, and then deliver their nipples to the children's mouth accurately. Look at the black sow again. It doesn't care about anything. It's on one side, lying down, done, just eat. It doesn't care about anything else. The 2 rows of teeth are there anyway, and they can't fly away, so you can grab them. Whoever grabs it belongs to him. Can't get it? You deserve nothing. This is exactly what Duanfang couldn't allow the black sow. Little 16s is so skinny and small. How can it compete with others? How can you not be partial as a mother? You're not worrying, humming, and smacking your lips. Are there any mothers like you? If you're not partial, Duanfang would be partial instead of you. Duanfang had Duanfang's method. When it was time to nurse, Duanfang blasted all the piglets away and circled them up. Now that's all right. The 2 rows of nipples are all reserved for little 16th. Little 16th was very happy, shaking its head. He looked a bit like Demon playing the harmonica. After little 16th had eaten and drunk enough, it then played with his mother's nipple, and Duanfang hugged the little 16th away before feeding other 15 children. Who doesn't listen? If it doesn't listen, he will beat it with the small stick in his hand. Duanfang must help Camel to raise little 16th well. Duanfang already thought about it. When little 16th grows up, he must let it enjoy the glory and wealth. Just let it be a mate, one bride a day. Only in this way can it be worthy of the pain in Camel's hand and the scar on Camel's hand. Since the birth of little 16th, Duanfang's heart has been on it, but he has become indifferent to himself. If he can't go to the army, then don't. It can kill him anyway. Duanfang was not sad anymore. On the contrary, he found joy in little 16th. People, that's how they are. When the heart dies, he is happy. It's not bad to play with the little piggies all day. Isn't that how Camel has been for decades? Duanfang does not allow himself to think about anything. Life is for living, not for thinking. Don't think about it. The days pass by themselves. On the other side of Wang village, at the brigade headquarters, Wu Manling was not doing well. It can be said that it is getting worse every day. She began to regret letting Daughter Demon go. If not let him go, Duanfang must be the one who leaves. Maybe she and Duanfang would have been good. Now that demon has been fulfilled, she and Duanfang, let alone good, even general communication has become a problem. Wu Manling's heartache is actually here. This thing is so stupid. But it isn't this place that made Wu Manling most distressed. The most distressing thing for Wu Manling is that after all the troubles, Wu Manling unexpectedly discovered that she really fell in love with Duanfang. Wu Manling is young after all. How can she understand such a common sense? A man and a woman can't stand tossing. A toss is definitely bad. Men and women are not people after all. They are dolls. The younger you are, the more moisture you have, and can be needed. Once needed, it will be combined, and it is especially easy to get entangled. It will be difficult to tear it out. It can't be torn clean either. Love, this thing, doesn't make sense at all. Saying Wu Manling, the most real situation is actually just her guilt. She felt that she owed Duanfang. As the guilt comes and goes, Duanfang's figure can't go away. Once lingering, it will sink from the mind and finally land in the sea of heart. When it reaches your heart sea, you're done. These days, Wu Manling's mind has been circling the scene of Duanfang bidding farewell to Demon. The way he smokes, the way he restrains himself, the way he pretends to be calm, and of course, the way he takes Wu Manling's arm and slowly puts it down. These movements are stubborn, yet soft, cold, yet possess his inner sense of proportion. Such is the case with a man like Duanfang. The more downcast and powerless he is, the more charming he is. Wu Manling fell into it bit by bit, calling heaven, but it never answered. Days have passed for so long. Wu Manling has been looking forward to Duanfang coming to argue with her. Wu Manling really hoped that in this way, if so, Wu Manling would at least have a chance to explain, at the same time a chance to promise. There would be room for their relationship. Duanfang just didn't come. Wu Manling also knew that Duanfang would not come. This is what makes Duanfang arousing and hateful, also what makes Duanfang fascinating. Since he doesn't come, she'll go find him herself. But Wu Manling didn't dare much. If the negotiation fails, it will not be easy to get it back. Wu Manling had nothing to do. It would be great if there's a matchmaker now to help them match. Wu Manling twitches a few times and she will definitely agree in the end. However, the best days have long been delayed by herself. Who would have the guts to be a matchmaker for the branch secretary? No one. A person's life is really settled, and you can't afford to delay any step. If it is really delayed, only you know whether it is warm or cold. Wu Manling locked herself in the room all day, as if waiting for something. But she was not waiting for anything. However, she was still waiting in her heart. Wu Manling generally knew Duanfang's whereabouts. He was usually at the pig farm in broad daylight. At night, he hangs out with a bunch of little brothers in the village and does nothing. That's basically how his life went. Even if Wu Manling made up her mind to find him, his whereabouts would still be troublesome. At night, a group of people nestled around him, and she couldn't see him. Judging by his style of commanding the wind and rain, he has become the village party secretary. It's not that Wu Manling has thought of ways, for example, to set up a literacy night school, or, for example, to organize a literacy art propaganda team, so that she could call Duanfang over and let Duanfang help. But when she thought of Duanfang with an unshaven beard, he looked completely hopeless, and it seemed that he would not agree. If Duanfang doesn't come, isn't that futile? Why bother with it? Just let it be. Unrequited love is endless. Wu Manling's days are getting thicker and thinner, but Wu Manling has a deep understanding of the meaning between the thick and the thin. Who would have thought that she caught a cold at such a time and was seriously ill? Speaking of illness, people in one village have always had a stubborn opinion that only seeing blood is a big deal. General headaches and fever never matter. They will pass after burying for a few days. Wu Manling was lying on the bed, bearing firmly. Her face was flushed red. It was noon. But a rare visitor came. It was Zhiying. This Zhiying, Wu Manling got drunk for the first time on the day she got married, and she felt uncomfortable for several days. How could Wu Manling have imagined that Zhiying would come back to her at such a time? She got out of bed and was so happy. Zhiying is chubbier, and her toddler son is even fatter. When the two fatties entered the door, Boundless went crazy, even more enthusiastic than Wu Manling. Unexpectedly, Zhiying's son is not afraid of dogs. After testing each other for a few times, they fell in love with each other. It was the first time Wu Manling saw Zhiying's son, so she must hug him and let her take a good look. This little guy refused. He doesn't. Wu Manling cursed and was extremely affectionate. Immediately, there was popularity in the house. Thinking about it, two close friends in the boudoir in the early years added a child. How can they not be affectionate? Manling returned to the bed, got into bed, took Zhiying's hand, and the two chatted slowly. Talk more and more. 1, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. After chatting all the way to 200, Zhiying noticed Manling's face and touched Wu Manling's forehead. Zhiying was taken aback and said, "Sister, how come you fever like this?" Wu Manling was stunned for a moment, and then remembered that Zhiying's sister was not someone else, but herself. It's been years since she hasn't heard that name. Very clear, carrying for heart and lung. Wu Manling grabbed Zhiying's hand, pressed it on her cheek, and rubbed it slowly, like a coquettish puppy. Zhiying said, "Shall I take you for an injection?" Her son suddenly sat on the ground. "No!" Wu Manling looked at her little nephew, smiled, and shook her head. After all, Zhiying was used to coax the kid, saying, "Be good, listen, let's get an injection." Wu Manling still shook her head. Just shaking like this, her tears came out. For so many years, everyone has regarded her as an iron bump, able to bear anything. She cares about everyone, but no one has ever cared about her. She is also a girl. Thinking of this, Wu Manling felt aggrieved and threw herself into Zhiying's arms. Zhiying backed off for a moment, slapped Wu Manling lightly on the back of her head, and cursed, "You doggy, didn't even look at it." Wu Manling didn't understand. Zhiying glanced at her belly, which had another one. Wu Manling stretched her hand, pulled up Zhiying's clothes, and put her palm directly on Zhiying's belly. She was touching. Zhiying's round and smooth belly was under her palm, tight and hot as hell. How happy she is! Zhiying is such a happy woman. She has everything. Wu Manling was sad for a while, but she had nothing. Thinking of this, Wu Manling couldn't bear it any longer and buried her head in Zhiying's arms. Zhiying stroked her hair and understood. This iron girl who can call the wind and rain, her horoscope is still missing a bit, and it seems she is still a bachelor. Zhiying hugged Wu Manling tightly and said, "Everyone knows that you have high qualifications, sister, so don't be too picky." This is Wu Manling's saddest sentence. It hurts and grieves. Wu Manling raised her head, looked at Zhiying tearfully, and said, "Sister, I wasn't picky. I really wasn't." Zhiying said in a low voice, "I don't believe it. The world is full of people, so there must be someone you like." Wu Manling stopped talking when the topic came to this point, and her eyes were in a daze. This was another pain in her heart, unspeakable. Zhiying poked Wu Manling for a while and said, "Is there?" Wu Manling glanced outside the door and said, "Yes, there is." Zhiying moved her buttocks and said, "Who is it?" Wu Manling was silent and just stunned. Zhiying said, "Who? Tell me, who is blessed to be my brother-in-law?" Wu Manling finally spit out the word, "Duanfang." This time, it was Zhiying's turn to stop talking. After a long time, Zhiying still said, "My mother said that she and Sanya were together." Wu Manling said, "I don't care about that." Zhiying said, "That's right. What about him? Duanfang, does he know? Are you guys clear?" Wu Manling shook her head. Wu Manling said, "I offended him. He won't forgive me. If I don't become the branch secretary—" Zhiying interrupted Wu Manling and asked eagerly, "How could you offend him? Nothing is related." At this point, Wu Manling couldn't say anything more. It involved demon and involved her nightmare. Can't say it to Zhiying, not even to her own mother. Wu Manling had to keep her mouth shut. Wu Manling looked disappointed and said, "Let's not talk about this." Zhiying sighed and said, "You always keep everything in your heart, and you are still the same. How can this work? You have a crush on someone, but he doesn't know. How can this work? I'll tell Duanfang." Wu Manling stopped her. Wu Manling said, "Let's leave it to fate." This sentence doesn't sound like what Wu Manling said. Although Zhiying is married, she has stayed in one village for so many years after all. Wu Manling's least favorite sentence is "leave it to fate." Whether it is in a meeting or on the Twitter, Wu Manling said the most precisely, "Man can conquer nature." Zhiying put her hands on Wu Manling's thighs and said, "Sister, have you forgotten what you said?" "What did I say?" "You said, man can conquer nature." It depends on what is going on, and specific problems needs to be analyzed in detail. Analyzing specific issues is all your farting. You're too shy. How come I don't know you, donkey? You don't want to bend down your waist or your legs. How can it be done? You can't let people ask you for everything. This kind of thing can't be done like that. Say you are out of Duanfang's league. But it depends on where you are. If you're willing to climb down from the tree, in my opinion, you're in. Hey, this kind of thing, what is in the league or not? If you don't have him in your heart, you're out. But if you have him in your heart, he is my brother-in-law. After all, Zhiying has given birth to a child, and she is an experienced person, and her speech is different from the past. She has no guard in her mouth. Wu Manling loved to listen. Wu Manling squeezed Zhiying's mouth and said, "I'll tear you apart." After laughing for a while, Zhiying brought the topic back. Zhiying said earnestly, "Sister, you're not young anymore. You should find a good one and get married early. Look, you fever like this, and there's not even a tea and water delivery person. So pitiful." Zhiying thought for a while and said softly, "When you get married, close the door at night and turn off the lights. That's good." Wu Manling's heart skipped a beat suddenly. Married at night. Close the door and turn off the lights. That's good. This sentence is attractive, but it's not provocative. It has a solid agitation. Talking in detail from the facts, Wu Manling closed the door and turned off the lights. This kind of thing can be regarded as happened. Actually, not. Wu Manling both knew and didn't know the taste of it. They are of two natures. It's two different things. Getting married, good or not good, is another matter. Wu Manling thought she wouldn't hate it. Wu Manling vaguely pushed the topic back to Zhiying's side, hesitating, and said, "Is he treating you well?" Of course, Zhiying knew who the he Wu Manling was talking about, glanced at the child on the ground, and said, "Not good." Wu Manling was a layman after all. How could she understand the subtleties in a married woman's speech? And said stupidly, "He promised me, why is it bad?" Zhiying said, "He's a bastard. Looks honest, but stupid. You can't touch him. As soon as you touch him, he wants it. You say it just went bad. How can we not be touched?" Zhiying touched her belly and said, "I'm already like this, and he won't let me go. He's still crazy. When it comes to the critical moment, he lets me call him Dad." Wu Manling asked in puzzlement, "How can he let you call him Dad?" "He loves me. He cares about me. I know it." "What is this? Did you really call?" Zhiying blushed and laughed. Zhiying said honestly, "I did. I also love him." "Really?" Wu Manling said. She already understood 8 or 9 points. Once understood, she didn't understand it even more. What exactly is that kind of thing? How could this happen? What exactly is it? No matter what made Zhiying like this, Wu Manling was completely darkened. Zhiying opened a small window for her. It seems that life is not only outside the house, it is hidden inside the house. It has its mysterious. It has its own unseen beauty, and it's fun, attracting. It's so exciting. Wu Manling said, "Really?" Zhiying said, "Sister, don't think that you have read more books than me and have seen more of the world than I do. You have to listen to me about this matter. Put down your airs and go tell Duanfang. Duanfang is not stupid. How can he not know your goodness? I'm afraid he won't be able to be in your league. You can't offend anybody. As long as you're good, men don't have such small minds. Listen to me. That's right." Wu Manling suddenly took Zhiying's hand and said, "Zhiying, call me Mom." Zhiying froze for a moment and understood. Suddenly there was a burst of laughter. Her shoulders shook from laughing. Her waist was bent and tears overflowed. Zhiying said, "Sister, I think you're a sensible person, but you are a big fool." Wu Manling followed her with a smile and said, "You're a big fool." In a sense, Wu Manling's determination was made by Zhiying for her. She decided, and only she knew how indomitable her heart was. She came to the pig farm after all, of course, pretending to be passing by. Before entering the house, a smell of pig blocked Wu Manling at the door. Duanfang was holding a small bamboo stick. His hair was messy, his beard was long, and he was very unkempt. He was playing with the little piggies as if he was giving them military training, telling them to attention, at ease, and cover. The little piggies ignored him, but Duanfang was still in high spirits. Wu Manling was standing outside the door, looking at him. After taking a look, she turned her head and brushed her hair behind her ears. After all, Duanfang saw Secretary Wu. He put down the stick in his hand, went out, and stood in front of Wu Manling. There was actually a sentence in Wu Manling's mouth. If it were usual, Wu Manling would have said, "Duanfang, shave your beard." But Wu Manling couldn't help it. She was about to shake. This glitch is bad. So Wu Manling couldn't speak. It was Duanfang who spoke. and he was very polite and considerate. Dunfang said, Secretary Wu, I know what you want to say. I don't hate you anymore. It's too cold here. You should go back. You know what I want to say? Dunfang smiled again. This man's smile is bad, too bad. She wanted to touch him with her hand, but wanted to slap him even more. He smiled so clearly, so silly, so confident, so humble. Playing around, never cares. It makes you feel indebted to him, Dunfang said. Secretary Wu, go back. It's too cold here. He was polite. Wu Manling suddenly thought of Demon. Demon did such an outrageous thing, but eventually gave Wu Manling a chance. It can be seen that Dunfang is not even as good as Demon. This man is bad, too bad. His heart is made of iron. Wu Manling's trembling had already spread to her lips, and she no longer cared about being the branch secretary of one village. She became anxious and lost her position all of a sudden. Dunfang, Wu Manling said, I know your heart. Why don't you know mine? Because it came out of a sudden. Wu Manling's words actually revealed all the cards. Speaking of which, the situation of the conversation is over. Conversations tend to be like this. The peak at the beginning often means falling in the alley at the beginning. Wu Manling's words frightened herself and also frightened Dunfang. Neither of them dared to say anything. Dunfang didn't believe that Wu Manling would say such a thing. He understood it, but he didn't seem to understand it. He wanted to listen to it again, but in the end, he understood it. Just didn't believe it. Dunfang said, You'd better go back. Dunfang said, It's really too cold here. Dunfang was still a mess, but his beard was shaved and his chin was clean. Men are strange things. Sometimes his chin is all he has. When the chin is clean, the person is upgraded to a higher level, and the whole person is clean together. The clean Dunfang sat on his bed, stroking his chin constantly. There was no one around, but he was terribly cramped. The key is not to find self-confidence. Who is Wu Manling? Secretary of the One Village branch of the Communist Party of China. Who is Dunfang? A pig farmer, a punk who is physically qualified but can't be a soldier. Dunfang lay down, thinking in his heart, Wu Manling is good, but is this a woman who can marry back home? It's a pity not to marry. To marry, will there be days to live in the future? That would require the implementation of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Why did such a thing suddenly appear? Too suddenly. Dunfang had never thought of this before. Isn't this a tot eating swan meat? Dunfang didn't feel happier when he thought about it. But on the contrary, the more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. Not too much to say that he was facing a great enemy. He kept touching his chin. Dunfang had a dream. This dream is happiness and fear. He dreamed of his wedding, and Wu Manling finally married him back. The scene of the wedding was huge, and the whole Wang village was mobilized. The tweeters kept playing revolutionary songs, the gongs and drums were beating, and the sound of firecrackers resounded through the sky. Pei Quan, Da Lu, Guo Le, and Hong Qi came to the pig farm. Pei Quan put a red cap on Dunfang's head without any explanation. Dunfang grabbed Pei Quan by the collar and said, "What is this for? Take it off." But Pei Quan dared not. Pei Quan said, "No, Secretary Wu has told me to put a red cap on you." Dunfang thought for a while and agreed. At this time, Hong Qi said, "Dunfang, you should care about us more in the future. Maybe I can be a soldier next year." Dunfang was so ashamed that he couldn't bear it. But Shen Cuizhen interjected, saying, "Don't worry, Hong Qi. Dunfang is backed by Wu Manling, and you're on us." Dunfang was so shy that he wanted to go underground. Unexpectedly, Hongqi was in military uniform in a blink. Hongqi said, "Everyone, stand up and send Duanfang off." Everyone stood up, and Duanfang also stood up. With a red hood on Duanfang's head, he lowered his head and headed towards the brigade headquarters. Duanfang suddenly realized that he was barefoot, and every step he took left a footprint on the ground. Looking back, the footprints looked like plum blossoms, one after another. They turned out to be pig footprints. Duanfang became anxious and said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" Pei Quan ignored him, untied his arms with a rope, and now Duanfang couldn't move his hands. In this way, Duanfang was taken to the brigade headquarters. The brigade was full of people, and all the commune comrades were sitting outside of the stage. They looked solemn and wore grass-green military uniforms. When Duanfang was led to the rostrum, everyone stood up and played the national anthem. Wu Manling was the only one on the rostrum. She held her head high and stood behind the microphone. There was also a chair beside her, which looked like Duanfang's. Wu Manling was not wearing a military uniform, but a khaki Chinese tunic suit with 4 pockets and a snow-white shirt visible at the neckline. Just as the high-spirited national anthem ended, Wu Manling made a "please sit down" gesture, and all the commune members sat down with a crash. The brigade was silent, and Duanfang was pinned down next to Wu Manling with a pillow on the chair. Wu Manling coughed, supported the microphone, adjusted the angle of the microphone, and said, "Today, Comrade Duanfang and I are getting married. Do you agree or not? If you agree, please applaud." The powerful echo of the microphone repeated in the brigade headquarters, and there was warm and prolonged applause from the audience. Wu Manling said, "Passed. Thank you, everyone." Wu Manling lifted the red cap on Duanfang's head. Duanfang was extremely shy. He never thought that the wedding would be like this. He wanted to escape, but Hongqi and Guole blocked his way. Duanfang was furious and said loudly, "Hongqi, what are you doing?" Hongqi said, "Sorry, brother Duanfang, I listened to Secretary Wu." Wu Manling glanced at Duanfang and said into the microphone, "Since we're married, we must have a baby. My opinion is to have a boy. If you agree, please applaud." Once again, there was warm, prolonged, and stormy applause from the audience. Duanfang couldn't bear it anymore and jumped up. He jumped off the stage, stepped on a lot of heads, and ran away desperately. The heads under the stage have excellent elasticity, and their necks seemed to be made of springs. Every time he stepped on, Duanfang jumped high. With the help of the elasticity of the necks, Duanfang jumped higher and higher, and with a stroke of his arms, he flew up. His arms were wings and oars. He seemed to be flying in the sky and swimming in the water. He first turned into a magpie, then turned into a rabbit, halfway into a praying mantis, and finally he turned into an eel. His body was soft and smooth, and the surface was covered with sticky secretions. This is good, much safer, and no one can catch him. However, one thing is very bad. No matter what Duanfang becomes, he is always recognized by others. Xinglong recognized him. Xinglong kicked him out of the cooperative medical care and gave him an idea. Let him go to Demon. Isn't this nonsense? How does Duanfang know where Demon is? Duanfang could only hide with Mr. Gu. Mr. Gu was not ambiguous. He said that materialism does not oppose marriage. Thorough materialism believes that marriage is an effective form of human reproduction. Since Duanfang's sperms are thousands of Chinese sons and daughters, Duanfang has no reason to hide this fact. Duanfang should apply the public ownership of sperms completely and selflessly. He is supposed to give all his sperms to the brigade, which is Wu Manling. He was relieved to let Wu Manling take care of Duanfang's sperm. Duanfang could only run away again. Relatively speaking, Kong Suzhen was more polite. She told Duanfang very regretfully that she could no longer be Amitabha. Farewell, Amitabhism. Farewell, Duanfang. A pair of peacocks to the southeast fly. At every 5 miles, they look back from the sky. The sunset is beautiful, but the infinite good is no more. Zhongshan's wind and rain turned pale when the soldiers crossed the river like a whale. Duanfang had nowhere to hide, and in an emergency, he jumped into the river. He hid among the water plants. However, the twitter was still ringing. The twitter could be heard clearly even underwater. Wu Manling's voice came from the twitter, and Wu Manling said, Duanfang, you can run away. Whether you are in the sky, on the ground, or in the water, you can't run away. All commune members, please pay attention. All commune members, please pay attention. Please take your slingshots, shovels, harpoons, and fishing nets. Quickly occupy every intersection and creek, and immediately capture Duanfang. Immediately capture Duanfang. It was Pei Quan who finally found Duanfang. He recognized Duanfang, the eel. Duanfang was lucky. How right he was to become an eel. Pei Quan couldn't catch him. As soon as Duanfang retracted his body, he immediately escaped from Pei Quan's fingers. However, Pei Quan didn't give any kindness to Duanfang this time, and he brought a big fishing net. Just above Duanfang's head, the fishing net was spread with a sound and covered Duanfang. The fishing net was pulled up, and Duanfang was dripping with water, mixed with tortoise, loaches, jellyfish, river mussels, frogs, and snakes. Duanfang was terrified. A snake had already entangled Duanfang with its body. In the end, Duanfang was thrown away by Pei Quan on Wu Manling's marriage bed. Because of the fishing net wrapped around his body, Duanfang couldn't escape this time. Wu Manling held a vise in her hand. She clamped Duanfang's tail in a vise and said unhappily, Duanfang, why are you running away? The twitter blared the revolutionary song again. Gongs and drums resounded, and firecrackers roared. Duanfang was startled and woke up, covered in sweat. It was broad daylight.